Mike Matchett with Small World Big Data. I'm here with some great Zerto people today. We are talking about some of the great IP and technologies and use cases that they're using Zerto with. I've got John Flisher, who's the global sales engineer.
Hi.
John, you've been telling me about Zerto in big accounts.
Sure.
And some of the unique things they're doing with Zerto. And it's come up at the show a couple times when I'm talking to people that security is a concern for some reason.
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit more about where people are looking to use Zerto to enhance their security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we trademarked the term IT resiliency, we knew that the focus wasn't just going to be on data protection and these classic use cases for backup and DR, absolutely the fundamental thing that we do very, very well. But the reality is that from an IT resiliency standpoint, that really we're talking about is doing something meaningful with that data. And meaningful with that data means it needs to take that data and let the business utilize it in a meaningful way that allows them obviously to bring in revenue. But with that becomes the idea of intellectual property and being able to actually secure the data. So there is a security component to IT resiliency that is opening up the discussion a little bit wider than just your classic data protection.
Right, so data protection implies security, resilience implies security, it requires it. And I've talked to a couple people about some of the different use cases that are a little surprising, a little not really just about replicating and recovering in a disaster. So security is one of those that's coming up. What are people specifically doing if they want to enhance their security? What are they specifically doing with Zerto?
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally when it boils down to what Zerto does really, really well is that we move data and we spin up copies of data for unlimited use cases. So from a security perspective, what people are asking is some way to do checks and balances against the systems from vulnerability testing or pen testing or any kind of security compliance that they need to do from a production system on demand.
Okay, so you've got replicates that people can use, and sometimes these can be spun up offline or in a cloud or somewhere else in a safe sandbox, and you can do things to them. And because of the near zero RPO, RTO, they're pretty much the same thing that's running in production at the time you push the button.
Absolutely. With our journal-based replication technology, you're talking seconds behind in terms of RPO and just a couple minutes to spin up that on-demand copy. So there's a savings, in ways it used to be done. There's a lot of systems and companies, they would keep a total of their copy of a system running all the time. That's compute, network, memory, storage, everything.
You had dev, test, pre-prod, QA,
and
post-prod.
This is expensive, and it's not necessarily the exact same thing because you're patching both systems. One might be a rev behind. We're spinning up an on-demand copy of it, like to your point, only a few seconds behind in time whenever they're ready to do this type of security scanning.
All right, so talk me through something that might happen, say, with ransomware. I get something going on in my system. We might call it a disaster, but it's a security problem as well.
Sure. So ransomware is obviously one of the biggest security concerns. You see it all over the news these days. The system goes out there and all of a sudden becomes encrypted and says you better pay me 5 Bitcoin or we're going to keep your data encrypted forever. And of course, these companies, they're paying this ransom. But as we all know, paying ransom is only going to make the baddies want to do it again and again. This is a revenue stream for them. So the idea with Zerto is to rewind back in time to right before that data became encrypted and do a restore, which is great, right? We do that very well. We've been talking about that for several years. But there's also another element to that is how long has that data, or how long has that system been compromised? How long has the malicious code been sitting there dormant?
Because it could be weeks, could be longer, you don't know.
That's right, and so with our journaling capability, now our long-term retention capabilities, we could restore to a point that we want to do some forensics on and understand, is the system still compromised? So before maybe I bring it back online into production, maybe I penetrate the system with several scans for viruses or any other malicious code that might run in there, and I say, hey, this meets the security compliance check. Great, now let's bring it back into production.
All right, because if you bring back something and then find that it's still corrupted, now you've got a double problem, right? You've got to still go back to a backup, and now you've lost the ability to recover what's happened on the system.
And now the CISO's, looks like he has mud on his face.
Looks like mud on his face.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have a couple things you can show us? Can we look at some?
Absolutely. We can architecturally talk about this a little bit, and we can walk through some how this this on-demand copies can be done.
All right, let's cut to that right now. Let's go look at that.
Oh, so hi, John.
Good, guys.
So we're talking about some of the things that can go wrong with a client's environment and some of the ways to use Zerto in a security role, not just in some of the other ways we think about it. So let's start by, tell me a little bit about one of the major things going wrong today with people's environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, data protection has many things and elements to it. It's not just doing a backup because something went wrong specifically internally, but we all know that from a security perspective, ransomware is on the rise. It's specifically going, and we've got a lot of unfortunately bad people out there trying to hold hostage people's data and then require money payment to get that. So with that, we see the capability, and what we've seen with our customers is to not necessarily pay these guys off like a lot of people do. You can't pay off into these kinds of things and expect that the behavior is going to change. So it's really let's recover that data to the most nearest point in time, and we do that effectively granularly through a journal-based recoverability aspect of constant data protection. So as we roll through here, we kind of see what that looks like. We've got a journal that can keep up to 30 days of quick recoveries and then long-term retention as well beyond that for years. But if you look at it, where the actual attack might happen in the afternoon, maybe around 5:30 or 5:26, we can literally roll back to right before it happened and get the most current version of the data within seconds of before it was encrypted. And this is very powerful, because if you think at other data capabilities in terms of retention and protection, going the last night's backup, you could have a 24-hour potential window of data loss. We're doing seconds of data loss, if any at all, to the version of the data that's unencrypted.
And so you can roll this journal back because you're doing continuous data protection going forward. You can roll the journal back on a very, very granular basis, which is excellent, and recover that. But okay, how does this necessarily help someone then recover from that, or use it in a forward-looking way to make sure their environment is safe going forward?
Hey, that's a great question, Dom. So, effectively, there's a proactive aspect to this, the platform as well, that you can utilize specifically, right? So, we can look at spinning up at any point in time a test copy of the entire data set, the entire application runtime, and do vulnerability scanning against it. And what Zerto could do from a resiliency platform perspective is offer aspects in all these things. We can do security scanning on this test use case. We can spin up the workload to do vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, really allow a risk assessment to happen proactively and at scale through automation for security auditing, and really kind of lining up what the internal CISO office might want to ethically hack against their own systems to see where they might need to fill some gaps and might be unfortunately open to a type of attack. And so if we proactively spin that up and run these processes, we can put ourselves in a better position to be secure going forward from a proactive manner.
It's almost as if you could use that journal then to recover an environment from before it was hacked, before the ransomware hit, and do penetration testing there, audit testing, look for the vulnerability that was abused. You can spin it up after it was hacked and
right.
there in a safe environment, of course, and look to see what damage was being done and maybe how fast it was spreading. Between those two views, you could do all that in a sandbox and bring up the entire production environment somewhere else in a safe way.
That's right. We can spin up these copies on demand and even at scale with our full REST API. So think about a world where you've got thousands and thousands of systems and you're not wanting to hit a few clicks in the UI. You want to actually kind of automate this entire process. And we could do that locally. We could do it at a secondary data center of your choice, or we could do that in a public cloud.
All right. Show me that. So let's look at how hard it is to bring up an environment.
You bet, man. So let's see. Can you guys see my vSphere environment here?
Yep, I see vSphere client.
Okay, good. So this is the environment in my lab that will effectively show how we're going to spin up a test workload. We're going to spin up a test workload, and we're going to hit it with just a few clicks, and then we're going to spin it down with just a few clicks. Now, if you notice right now within this test cluster where I'm going to put the workload, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of cloud bursting into this environment. We'll spin it right up. You'll see the VMs pop up in inventory here, and they'll say testing recovery. And from that point, we can start to do all of our scanning and things that I'm mentioning, right? So 1 second, and I will over here. All right. Okay, so this is the latest version of Zerto 7.0, and effectively, what we're going to do here real quickly is just kind of show how this is done. Now, this virtual protection group is aligned with how we might want to protect certain workloads, and in an aspect that all of these systems within this virtual protection group are contained within an application that's very important. So we want to group them together from the same point in time from a recoverability standpoint. Okay, if I kind of just show you here real quickly what that looks like. I've got 2 virtual machines. I'm covering, protecting 7.3 gigabytes. These are kind of small from a test perspective. This allows me to drill down into the systems and then pull a point-in-time recovery or testing recovery granularly right before something might happen. So from a test perspective, let's just say this is a proactive approach. What we'll do next, which is spin up a test of this environment at the cluster that I showed you in VMware a second ago. We'll grab it. Here. Now we could do boot order for the specific VMs. We're not going to as well, or add some additional scripting. That's always additional automation components. Super easy to do here, and just to start test, right? And this is going to spin up very easily.
All right, and in there we could have picked the recovery point or the failover point we wanted to roll back to in a very regular basis, right?
Yeah, and what I chose was the most recent, which is probably 95% of our test use cases. We want the most recent version of the data, but yeah, we could have easily just rolled back in time. Good point. To as long as we had history within that journal. Okay. So it's going to kick off here just a minute. Let me get this. This might be where you can show my shirt here while we wait.
The master of disaster, right? The classic shirts.
That's right. So let's roll over to VMware and see what's going on.
All right.
Let's click here. And we'll kick off a test job. So test.
And here we could pick a different checkpoint if we wanted to, right? That's
right. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and click the latest point in time.
Okay.
Which is the most recent version of the data. And I'm going to start my failover testing. We'll see this job kicking off here.
It's always amazing how much.
Show the master of disaster T-shirt.
Yeah, there you go. Love those shirts. It's always amazing how much is actually going on in the background when we're looking at something like this, and it's really doing quite a bit. Oh, you're done already.
Let's see here. So if you can see from this view right here, I've got two systems sitting in the testing recovery mode. They're spinning up right now. They're complete. So at this point, you could come in and you could fire off. Now the VMware tools are out of date, so it's barking at me, which is no big deal. But at this point, we could come in and start doing penetration testing or any kind of vulnerability scanning. They're an exact, like I said, replica copy of the production system sitting side by side, but with a different fenced-off network configuration for the security team to come in and allow any kind of penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, all the things I mentioned earlier that will effectively give them a compliance check that the system is robust and will not be affected by things like ransomware or any other security vulnerabilities that they see fit.
So just a few clicks, just a few clicks, you clone those systems. They're sitting side by side. You could have recovered those to a different sandbox or different, even in the cloud if you'd wanted to, right? You could have just aimed them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could point them to Azure. We could point them to Amazon. We could point them to a Hyper-V cluster. You name it. We're effectively adding new platforms rapidly. So the idea is to utilize the software to spin up the compute from an x86 perspective anywhere that sees fit for said customer, right? And after that, it's really easy to kind of stop the test, right? We just kind of come in here and we roll over through what's going on. We see that. Get my UI to work. Let's see what's going on here. And we hit the stop button. Simple as that. And we can put whatever note we in. Right, everything passed. Right, we've done all our scanning. And we'll just watch this running task kick down.
All right, so somebody in a security team could do this over and over and over again. They could run different scans. They could pick different nodes. They're not impacting production, but they're getting a copy of either the current production or the point right before failure happened again, or right after the systems got infected. It's their choice, and they could be taking these off somewhere else. So this is pretty easy. I think there's a lot of people could find a lot of use with this kind of functionality.
Yeah. And think about automation at scale. Like I mentioned, we have a full REST API. So maybe they're not even inside the UI. Maybe they're literally clicking a button, putting in some credentials, and going from there, and allowing this at scale for hundreds and hundreds of VMs to let the automation handle it, and really just kind of spit back a report that says, hey, yeah, this system's vulnerable, this one's not, and here are the ports, or here's the vulnerabilities we found within the type of scanning that we're doing. So, this UI function is very easy for anyone to learn at scale. We've got components to do this, wider and deeper within all platforms.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you for showing me this, John.
You bet. One last thing I just want to show you real quick on the vSphere. You see that we've spun everything back down. Those test copies are no longer in inventory. We've fully handled all those API calls to the VMware infrastructure and spun it back down for you automatically.
Awesome. Once again, thanks, John.
You bet.
So from there, what we kind of demonstrated is how we would do this type of on-demand copy to do our vulnerability scanning. But the reality is that Zerto has a full REST API. So at scale, you can see where that's reactionary, and we could make sure the system's compliant and then bring it back online. But from a proactive perspective, maybe pre-breach, we want to fundamentally go out there in a proactive state and scan those systems at scale. So imagine spinning up thousands of copies of thousands of systems at a time, doing your vulnerability scanning against them, and then coming back with a nice itemized report that says, here, Mr. CISO, all your systems are compliant today before he's had his morning cup of coffee.
And they didn't have to go into production and disturb that,
Nope.
but it's a pretty damn near copy of production.
That's right, production's not affected whatsoever.
And you've got your pen testing done, you've got your other testing done, you've got your scans done. And I was reminded of the old days when we had antivirus scanning problems on virtualization, right? So now we have this multi-cloud problem, we have distributed apps, we have hybrid apps, we have virtual protection groups, and we want to look at everything in a consistent way. So the problem's only got more challenging. I'm glad to see Zerto's tackling that.
Absolutely.
So where's Zerto going to take this in the future with security? Are you going to look for more features and functions and enhancements on this aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at scale, as we're looking at adding additional platforms, that security is always going to be something that we're going to have to be aware of, where the compliance meets inter-platform interlocking and making sure all the data placements in a place that's managed from one data management plane is where Zerto's going to be effective in that role.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here today, John.
You bet.
Great. That was John Flisher. And we are going to come back with some more coverage of other Zerto enhancements in just a bit. Thanks.